want some water. Let me check and see if that'll be okay.
Please.
Just double check with the doctor.
Yes, not having seizure. It's mast cell and needing water. I'm going to get sicker.
Hello, my name is Patrick Usher, and the video you've just seen is that of Jared, whom I will be interviewing in today's episode, at a time when she was very sick with postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, along with mast cell activation problems. Mast cell activation problems, which are an overly allergic response to foods that previously did not cause issues in the sufferer, affect a sizable minority of POTS patients. They essentially involve a release of histamine in response to foods and substances which did not normally, or before the person was sick, did not normally elicit that response. In this interview, Jared will share with us how she managed to recover from POTS and mast cell activation problems, so as to now lead a normal, healthy life. At the worst of her illness, she was in a wheelchair for 1 whole year. And the mast cell activation problems she had with various foods meant that she could only eat a total of 8 different foods at the worst of her illness. Any other food would set off a reaction such as the one you have just seen. But she recovered by following a limbic system rewiring program called the Dynamic Neural Retraining System, which is a limbic system rehabilitation program aimed at tricking, essentially, the limbic system when it has entered a hardwired state of crisis following a traumatic event, traumatic being understood broadly to include not just psychological but also physical traumas, such as Lyme disease or viral illness or mold poisoning or chemical poisoning, to trick that part of the brain out of that crisis state, to rewire it back to normal, out of chronic hypervigilance. This is the same program that I followed to recover from POTS several years ago, and then set about to write a book, POTS, What It Really Is and Why It Happens, which argues that POTS is a neurological problem rooted in the limbic system, the limbic system being the start of the autonomic nervous system, hence why POTS is also termed a form of dysautonomia. Jared is living proof of the power of neuroplasticity to heal the brain, which then in turn allows the body to heal up, to heal from the secondary effects of a brain in crisis in the first place. I hope that you enjoyed today's interview, and that if you have POTS or mast cell activation problems, that you can look at Jared's experience and realize that the brain is a powerful organ, and when it goes wrong, it can powerfully and detrimentally affect our health. But at the same time, the brain is also a neuroplastic organ. It can change. We can push it in the right directions. We can trick it out of a traumatized and hardwired state of crisis and get our health back and reclaim our lives. And that is what I hope you will see very powerfully in Jared's strong and inspiring message in today's interview. Hello and welcome to this, the second in my series of interviews with people who have recovered from postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome by following the Dynamic Neural Retraining System. I'm delighted today to welcome Jared to join me, and I'm particularly happy to have Jared as my second guest because when I was sick several years ago, I reached out to Jared via Facebook and contacted her, and she offered very supportive advice at that time. I found her name online, that she was one of the people who had recovered by following the DNRS program, and so it's nice that things come full circle, and that today that I can welcome you, Jared, to this interview. It means a huge amount to me, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. It's my total pleasure. I love being able to give back and help people that are struggling with it.
Super. So just before we get into the main interview, Jared, just tell us a little bit more about yourself. Where are you based and what's life like for you there?
I am in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm a homeschooling mom. I'm a Christian. I love the Lord, and I'm just busy, man. I'm busy all the time. I'm cleaning my house, educating the future people of the world here. I'm busy. but it's good. I have a blessed life, and I'm thankful. I'm married happily, and that's me in a nutshell.
That's quite a nutshell. That's quite a nutshell. Um,
Yes.
so my first question to you, Jared, is take us back to the start before you had POTS, before you became unwell. Tell us about what your life was like back in those days.
My life was good. I mean, I was in my 20s. I had my older son was 3. My younger son was just a baby. I mean, just a new baby. I was in the prime of life. I had 2 young kids, and they were my world. I stayed at home with them, and I felt amazing. I lived life just with lots of energy. I exercised a lot. I did a lot of Zumba. Life was good. It was a good, happy time, before that happened,
Right, and then tell us about when things started to go wrong for you. Did you kind of have a sudden onset of symptoms, a gradual onset of symptoms? Tell us about the early days when you noticed that things were just not right anymore.
Well, my husband took a new job, which was very exciting, and we moved to Miami, Florida. We were living in Florida at the time, and we found a house to rent, and my other family members, when we were living there, started getting sick in this house. My Toby, who is my youngest son, he was getting these double ear infections. He was always just this green snot pouring out of this kid, and I'm thinking, what is wrong with my baby? I mean, he's breastfed. I never take him anywhere. He stayed at home with me, and I couldn't figure out why he was so sick. And then my older son, his personality was completely different. He was like a monster. I have videos of him just screaming, and he just wasn't even himself anymore. And my husband actually got a terrible sinus infection in this house, and he was hospitalized for it for 3 days. I mean, we were all sick, really, except for me. I was kind of just the person trying to take care of my family and figure out what in the world was going on with all of us after we moved into this new house. So while we were there, we discovered that there was a leak under the sink. Okay. And we called the landlord, and, it smelled awful. She kept sending the same guy by who really didn't fix it. He said it was fine, but we just knew that it wasn't. I started researching it. When we looked under there and really explored in our kitchen, we started realizing there's mold under here, and it looks to be extensive. And I started thinking, I wonder if this is making, my family sick. So my landlord, I called the landlord and I talked to them about it. They ordered a mold test, and the mold test, they wouldn't show us the results. So I thought, okay, this is not good. Something just didn't sit right. So we got our own mold test. We had a company come out, and they told us, it was a 2-story house, and they told us that the mold was from the floor all the way almost up to the ceiling in the house, in the big 2-story panel of the house. It was in the air conditioner. I mean, mold had infiltrated this house in really high numbers. Around that time, of course, this is a progression of events. I make it sound like this all happened in one day. It happens over time where you figure out all of this stuff, but got our own mold test done. Everything came back really, really elevated. We realized we needed to get out of the house. But during that time, I started kind of feeling off and having some very weird symptoms. Like I was really melancholy and blue, and but I had no reason, and I didn't understand why. And I'm a pretty joyful, happy person, so it was just really unlike me. One of the other things that I noticed about that I was different is that I was kind of just getting these weird moments where I had a lot of energy, like super adrenaline. Like I could bust out 30 push-ups and it didn't even faze me. Just, I had this crazy amount of adrenaline, and I call them now adrenaline surges, but it was very, very odd. But I didn't think too much of it because my husband, again, was hospitalized with a sinus infection, and my children were, I just wasn't paying much attention to the way I felt. I just noticed that I was just a little off, So we made plans to get out of the house, and we moved into a different house. And the second day that we were out of the mold house was when everything changed for me. That was when my health suddenly changed. It just came to a screeching halt, really. I mean, my entire world was completely changed.
Right, okay. So that's a very interesting background, Jared, because from the point of view of the hypothesis I'm trying to put forward, there can be many varied triggers for POTS. And, of course, one of those is, in fact, mold exposure. And a lot of people, it doesn't, like the limbic system, the flight or fight part of the brain, can end up in crisis for many different reasons. And people often get worried, they say, well, if I have mold exposure, does that, will the program work for me or whatever? But actually, there are many different routes to end up in the same traumatized state. And it just goes to show how, it's so totally not the fault of the individual, because you just moved into this new house and there's no way you can control how your primitive brain is going to respond to these toxins that are suddenly in the environment. And that's what you experienced and your whole family, experienced.
Right.
You were all feeling sick. And the other really interesting thing from what you just said is that you started to notice this release of adrenaline.
Yeah.
Which, in terms of what I put forward in the book and on this channel, is, for me, it's the key reason why, for various reasons, you end up with elevated heart rate upon standing. It kind of leads to various mechanisms. So, it just fits perfectly with this idea of a triggering event beyond the control of the individual concerned, and that just tips that primitive part of your brain over into flight or fight. Take us then. So then, the second day you moved to the new house, suddenly things became very dark for you. So.
Pretty suddenly.
Pretty suddenly.
And let me add to your point that it was kind of the perfect storm. I mean, I'm in this new city with, I have a new baby.
Yeah.
My husband's in a new job. It's a high stress situation, and we moved our entire family to a new city without any family, and all of a sudden we have to move again 3 months later. So I think it was the perfect storm with the stress and with the mold. It all just combined into this craziness that I'm about to tell you about. Yeah. So on the second day, to answer your question now, when I was at Target, actually, and I was shopping with my kids, and I started feeling quite odd. I started kind of feeling like my blood sugar was low, like kind of dizzy, unaware. I'm like, good night, what's wrong with me? I need to maybe drink some orange juice. So I went up front and I got a container of orange juice and I chugged it. And I just started, everything just, from that point, I think I called my husband or my mother-in-law, somebody, and I told them that I was about to pass out at Target and that I was not doing well. So I ended up, after I drank the orange juice, I started shaking and I started kind of going unconscious. And this lady came up to me and she grabbed me because I was falling. And I started talking like I had a stroke, like I couldn't get any of my words out. It was like, like just mumbling, like I couldn't talk anymore. And I remember thinking, what the heck is wrong with me? Am I dying? I can't even talk. And they called an ambulance, and my gosh. So they picked me up. My kids, this black hole comes in on me. I can't, everything is gone. I just see my kids being rolled away, strapped into the Target cart. And they take me away, and I'm trying to portray an image of sheer horror, and I don't think my words do it justice, because I can't talk. I can't speak correctly. I can't move any of my limbs. I get to the emergency room and they wheel me into a corner. They test me for drugs because they think I'm on drugs.
Right.
They tested they tested me for illegal drugs in my body twice because they thought I was some kind of crackhead high.
Yeah.
Because by that point, by the time I got into the ER, I was completely catatonic. For 5 hours, I was in there catatonic. I couldn't talk well. I couldn't control my arms at all. I couldn't control my legs. I couldn't control my tongue. Everything was moving every which way. I'm completely conscious for all of this and aware that something majorly screwed up is going on with me. And I'm being ignored by all the medical staff because they think I'm some kind of crackhead.
Yeah.
And I'm alone without any of my family. It was terrifying. It was terrifying. I pretty much thought I was going to die. Probably like an hour. I kept screaming out for help, that someone would help me, because they were ignoring me and I didn't know what was happening. And I'm begging nurses, please help me. Something's wrong with me. And a doctor walked by and he said, Mrs. Cavato, you're having a panic attack. And I said, then why can't I effing talk?
Yeah.
Because I couldn't. My tongue was completely uncontrollable. I couldn't even, my speech was completely slurred. It was wild. I've never seen anything like it. Or even to this day, talking to people with POTS and mast cell stuff, I haven't talked to many who have had that. My mother-in-law came after probably an hour and a half or so, and she said, no, she's not a drug addict. Something's majorly wrong with her. And they finally started trying to seek out what was wrong with me. I got the MRI. I got, the CT of my brain. I had everything. So I was hospitalized for 5 days. It was... When my husband got there a couple hours later, throughout the night, I started having this crazy adrenaline. It was like it would come on me in a surge, and my whole body would shake violently, crazier than anything I have ever experienced. It was like I was being electrocuted. And then it would go away, and then maybe it was like labor pains, except I was being flooded with adrenaline, and all of a sudden it was like I was being electrocuted and shaking, and so they gave me a bunch of medicine to try to help me, and I don't think anything worked until they gave me Ativan and Benadryl.
Right.
And then all of that started settling off, and I was calm, But again, 5 hours of being catatonic and in between being rigid and stiff, in between that and being not able to control my body, it was absolutely terrifying. And to be ignored and treated like you're a drug addict when you're not. I thought I was dying and they were just going to look on. I mean, it was awful. And in meantime, my kids were left at Target with somebody I don't even know.
Right.
So it was pretty much the worst day of my life.
My heart really goes out to you that you had to go through such an awful experience. It's very, very harrowing to hear that. I can resonate somewhat from my own experience. It wasn't that bad, but the incredible nightmarish feelings of, is this really me? Is this really my body? Is this really happening to me? It's a very, very, very scary place to be. And then to be ignored in the way that you were ignored, or invalidated by suggesting that you were a drug addict, was quite... It's sort of, one hears, of course, of how POTS patients can be treated poorly by the medical profession, though that's changing for the better more and more. But that, to me, is sort of the most emblematic story of how invalidated someone with POTS and limbic system impairment can be. So tell us then, Jared, tell us the next part of the story if you want to go to the diagnosis of POTS, or whatever is the next most prominent thing.
Yeah, so I stayed in the hospital for 5 days, and I was having a really, really high heart rate, but they were just, chalking it up to anxiety. my lungs didn't feel right. I wasn't breathing right. And it's like, I'm not breathing right. And they gave me some kind of, I think it was Zopanex, for me to inhale, and it wasn't doing anything, and to help me breathe, And I remember just my heart rate being so high. And the lady was just like, I think you're nervous. I'm like, ma'am, I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
I'm exhausted. I was up all night doing what I just told you. I'm exhausted. I'm not anxious right now. I don't know why my heart rate is that high, because I'm not anxious. The hospital visit that I had was quite interesting, because the next day, after all of that craziness that I just told you about that I went through, I woke up in like this dream, and it's like, okay, wow, that really just happened last night. And I was completely just unable to really function at all. To top it off, I kind of had a male nurse that kind of took advantage of the fact that I was completely incapacitated, and did some things that he should not have done in the nursing role, which complicated the hospital stay for me in my own head. I was nursing at the time, and I had stopped nursing abruptly, so I'm engorged. I'm rock hard and swollen. And I'm sorry to tell you that, because you're a guy and you're just never going to get that. But any woman watching that's nursed will know exactly what I'm talking about. And he came in and just was just checking me all the time. So that whole, just some of the things that he did were not right to me. I wish I had the courage to have reported him, but my life had changed dramatically, and I just didn't. But nevertheless, the next 5 days they checked me for all sorts of things, and they didn't really get very far. They didn't get far at all. They checked me for heavy metals. They checked me for my urine for the tumors that you can get from that give you all the excess energy. What is that called? I'd have to Google it and get back to you. But they checked me for everything, and they weren't really getting anywhere. But I wasn't able to really walk or do anything. I came home. It's like usually when you leave the hospital, you feel better, right? Like, yay, I feel better. Now I get to go home.
Yeah.
Well, I left and I didn't feel better.
Yeah.
I felt terrible. I'm trying to walk into my house. It's near Christmas time, and it's this joyful moment at my house, and there is no joy, because I'm living in some kind of weird cage where I'm panting to walk. I'm totally out of breath. I can't walk. My heart is racing and pounding. I used to be able to walk from the car into my front door, and all of a sudden I can't. It's just, I was completely bedridden. Let me just say, looking back, I want to be forthcoming with you that I went to the hospital probably 13 times.
Wow.
During the first year that I was diagnosed. So it's all a very big blur, and I'm trying to be the best historian I can.
Yeah.
But because of all of that craziness that occurred, I think the first hospital trip that I came home from, where I was hospitalized, was different than my Christmas hospitalization that I had. Mm-hmm. The first time that I came home, I was completely bedridden. Mm-hmm. Shoot, I can't think, Patrick. I can't get these hospitalizations correct. The first time I came home, I couldn't walk. I can't remember when I was bedridden, honestly, but it was in the very beginning. All I know is that I can't remember if it was the first hospitalization or the second, where I was, after that, it was over for me.
Yes.
I couldn't walk. I could not walk. I could not stand. I couldn't even lift my head in bed without my blood pressure dropping.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't do anything. Like, people are dressing me, taking me to the bathroom. I cannot, even turn in bed because my blood pressure's tanking. So, I was really, really sick. I was having hot flashes that were lasting like 6 hours, like on fire, hot flash for 6 hours. Just everything was over for me. That's the best way I can explain it. I was completely bedridden.
You were in effect completely disabled.
Completely. Like I couldn't even dress myself. I remember my mother-in-law and my aunt, or my husband's aunt, coming over, and they were trying to get these compression hose on my legs and just ripping them up because I can't help at all. All I could do was lay there and let them do that. It was terrible. It was terrible. I couldn't even hold my baby to do anything. I mean, I could do nothing. It was bad, man. It was really bad. I was having uncontrollable diarrhea, so figure that one out when you can't get to the bathroom.
Right.
And people have to take you there. It was a very humbling experience. Very, very humbling. To not be able to take care of yourself, to not be able to really dress or do needing help to the bathroom. It was very humbling.
And it makes sense that it's a struggle to put all the different events together, because when you're stuck in that traumatized state, I mean, memory is a big part of the limbic system. So it's all going to become this vortex of a mush of a traumatic time, and it's very hard to pick it all out. But you're doing superbly well with it, and it is a very humbling story also to listen to. And I want to, can you remember though when you were officially diagnosed, when you actually got clarity that you had POTS?
Okay, so one of these 20 billion hospital visits, because it felt like every time I was turning around, I was being taken in an ambulance to the hospital. That's all my children saw when they were little, was mommy going in the ambulance. It was terrible. Yeah. So I remember this one day, I was laying on the floor and I took my blood pressure. I was completely not well. Terrible day. My blood pressure was 60/40. Okay, yep. It was bad. That's bad, yeah. I went. They took me away. Somewhere around in there, I saw this guy. I saw a heart doctor in South Florida. His name's Dr. Funk. Super young. Like normally when you see a doctor, you want like some old, guy who's been doing this like 20 billion years. So I went to see him in his office either after that visit or somewhere around, again, the vortex. But I went to see this guy in his office from referral from the hospital about my heart stuff and the blood pressure, the heart rate, all of that. And his name was Dr. Funk, and I come in there and I'm telling him, like, dude, I was fine one day, and the next second I can't walk, I can't breathe, I can't stand, I can't do anything. Like, I'm done. I'm completely, literally disabled. I can do nothing. I don't even know how this happens. And he's like, you know what? He's like, I just got this article like 2 days ago. And he's like, it's really rare. It's really rare, but I think it's what you have. Hold on, let me go get it. So he runs out of the office and he grabs it and he's like, this is it. He's like, this is what you have. I'm almost sure of it. It's called POTS. So that was kind of like one of the blessings that kind of happened for me, because a lot of people, it takes a really long time to kind of get diagnosed, whereas for me, thank the good Lord, it happened in the beginning of this nightmare journey for me, was how the POTS thing came around. I had already gotten a tilt table test, I think, before I met Dr. Funk, and I think they said it was like neurocardiogenic syncope, but again, no, there's no real help or anything for me. And then in one of my ER visits that I made, Dr. Funk was the visiting cardiologist, and he came in and told me to come see him in his office. And then when I saw him in the office that day, he told me about the article he had read like 2 days before, and he really thought that's what I had. But if Dr. Funk had never read that article, if I had come in there, a year earlier, I just accredit so much just God kind of working that out for me, because I really needed that, because I was in a very lost and lonely torturous place. My body was torturing me. I can't say that any other way. I was in absolute hell, and I don't think I'm conveying that well, but my blood pressure was completely unstable. It would go from 180 over 110 down to 60 over 40. Bam, like that. That doesn't feel good. And just these moments where I'm all of a sudden just intensely sweating. It just snap a finger and I'm drenched in sweat, and I'm having uncontrollable diarrhea, and my heart is pounding. I mean, it's not a good way to live when you're a young woman and you're in your 20s, and all of a sudden you can't walk anymore, and you've got some crazy problem that nobody knows what it is. Mm-hmm. And some of the doctors that I thought that I had, I think it's called shy Drager or something like that. I'm 36 now, and so all this happened, I'm guessing, when I was around 29-ish. So it happened to 28, 29, somewhere in there. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, no, you are conveying the hell of it exceptionally well.
Oh, good, because it was hell, and I don't want anyone out there thinking that that they're in a lost place where they can't be helped and come to the other side. Mm-hmm. That's why I want to talk to you and talk to people about this, because no matter how far gone you are, you can always come back. Always.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you are a living testament to that. And I want to, before we continue with the narrative, just two very specific questions.
Sure.
You talked about your blood pressure and it's wavering all over the place. Can you remember what kind of heart rate scores you would have had at that time?
Yeah, my heart rate was kind of all over the place too. I know I have met and talked to a lot of people that would get low heart rate, but that was never really the case for me. Mm-hmm. Mine was always high. It was like a fantastic day if I was under 110. It was like 106, woohoo, Yeah. Today 106, I would not feel well right now if I was 106, but then it was like a blessing to be 106. That's fantastic for me.
Yeah.
I think so. Really, I think I kind of hung out around 120, and when it was really, really bad for me. I mean, obviously, I wasn't doing a whole lot of standing and walking, but the longer I stood and the longer I walked or attempted to walk, it would go up. 150. Mm-hmm. It's been up in the 160s. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. For me, it was similar, kind of usually between 120 and 130, and then if I tried to do more, it would be correspondingly higher. So that's very helpful just for people to know, because many people, they'll be wondering that particular question. So you finally had the diagnosis. Thank God you had the diagnosis, and as you say, the mind boggles at the thought of what might have been the situation had you not met that particular consultant and the events that transpired to lead to the diagnosis. So that must have led to an initial feeling of relief or hope. Can you talk about that and the initial treatment, and whether that hope was sustained or whether it fell away?
It was good that I had a name for it, but the trouble is that I just continued developing and getting worse. The initial treatment was to give me, what's the name of the medication to raise your blood pressure?
Midodrine?
Yes. Yeah. So I was on that. I was on a beta. They put me on a beta blocker. And I mean, that was really, the Midodrine got me to be able to not have to stay in bed. I could drag myself along the wall to the bathroom instead of having to have somebody take me. You see the difference? It's good. I was glad that I was able to lift my head again without things going awry for me, but dragging myself to the bathroom wasn't what I hoped for my life in my 20s.
Yeah. Indeed, Midodrine is actually normally used amongst the very elderly to raise blood pressure. It's
Yeah.
It's not for the 20s.
That was the initial thing. I went to an electrophysiologist, like a special cardiologist, and honestly, doctors were really baffled by me. I was flushing. I was turning like beet red. I was doing a lot of swelling, just very odd symptoms that were not completely characteristic of POTS. So doctors really at that time, and I know it wasn't that long ago, but they were really unversed with POTS. They are even more so than they are now, if you can imagine.
Yeah.
So I think that the typical mindset was, you may have POTS, but that doesn't really sound like POTS to me. I was breaking out in hives. I was starting to develop into a worse place. I told you about my bathroom issues. Like, I was having solid food come out. Like, I wasn't digesting my food. I was dropping weight big time. And I was already kind of small, so, I was down to 100 pounds, which for me, that was small for me, just progressing into very sick place, and people were not getting that. It wasn't making any sense. Like, the POTS, okay, your blood pressure, your heart rate, but why all these other crazy things I should be able to do? I should be able to walk from the chair to the couch. I should be able to stand and brush my hair. But at that time, I had nothing to give. I couldn't brush my hair. Brushing my hair was a chore. Brushing my teeth was a chore. I just had no energy, none. Like, no energy sounds so, like, such a nice way to say it. Like, I had nothing. My tank was completely empty, so I couldn't do anything. So the initial, it gave me a little hope, like, okay, wow, praise God. It normally takes, this guy's telling me, 8 years or something for people to find this thing, and I found it in just a few months. I am so thankful for that, and I still am. I'm so grateful. But it just still wasn't really making a whole lot of sense with everything that I was dealing with.
Absolutely, and I think the confusion that your medical team had about you, that they said, okay, it looks like POTS, but there's other things going on that kind of complicate the picture. Many other things going on. That kind of speaks to the fact that when you have a limbic system impairment, you don't just have one. You have a swathe, of constellation of illnesses that stem out from that initial root and branch.
Yes.
And branch out. And so people often think, oh, I have POTS, or I have fibromyalgia, and mast cell problems, and chronic fatigue syndrome, and chemical sensitivity. And
yes.
they think they're all separate, but actually they're all stemming from the same root. And your story really speaks to that.
Yes, I developed into the chemical sensitivity as well. It was a very dark place in my life because I couldn't be around people anymore. I had some pretty extreme allergies that developed, so like my mom and dad have dogs at their house, or they did at the time, so I couldn't hug my mom because she had dog on her. Yeah. On her clothes and on her body. I couldn't be around anybody with deodorant on. Anybody that had washed their clothes, like, with a strong fabric softener, like, I couldn't be anywhere near them. It was getting to this place where I couldn't go out in public anymore. It was like I was in this kind of isolated prison of misery where I felt terrible and I couldn't be around people. And I felt really bad for my husband because, of course, he can't, I'm like, honey, you can't wear that deodorant anymore. You can't use your shampoo. You've got to switch. You've got to, you can't do this, that, or the other thing. I was only able to eat, I had dropped down. I couldn't even eat any food anymore. I was only eating like 8 foods. So, because I couldn't tolerate them. My heart would pound and race, and there were just only certain things that I could do.
Right, and in terms of the chemical sensitivity, can you describe what that actually felt like physiologically? I mean, if I think back to my time with it, it was like I'd get hit by a blast of smell and my tongue would feel like it was being poisoned and I'd feel kind of nauseous. Does that kind of resonate? Was that sort of how it felt for you, or can you describe that for us?
You know, I think being chemically sensitive feels different for everybody. Mm-hmm. For me, it would bring about all of the POD symptoms, all of these what I called at the time mast cell attacks, where it would just be a sudden, just blood pressure off, heart pounding, you know, lungs burning, flushing, turning beet red. You know, feeling like I'm gonna die, pass out. You know, that's probably a good way to describe it. I could not tolerate it. Itching, just not being able to breathe, shortness of breath. You know, that kind of thing.
Right.
And I developed an EMF sensitivity too for those out there that have that. So I kind of had a conglomerate of it. So with the EMF sensitivity, it felt like I was being like kind of mildly electrocuted is the best way to put it. Like I couldn't, like if I was in a room where 3 people had like iPhones on, I wasn't doing well. Mm-hmm. I felt like I was on a live wire. And I started noticing it every time I watched TV. I started feeling just starting to get majorly ill. And I thought, what is wrong with me? Why is this happening to me when I'm watching? Every time I sit here and watch TV, I'm having these issues. And then I was having it, of course, when I was on the computer. And it started coming together for me with the EMF sensitivity.
Right. And for me, when it comes to MCS and EMF, and when I try and explain those to people who've never had them, they kind of shrug and they're like, oh, that sounds weird or sci-fi or alien, you know?
Yes.
And people have no clue how when the parts of the brain that control sensory perception, which are rooted in the limbic system, when they go wrong, very strange things can happen. But they're very, very real to the person who's experiencing them.
Yes, and very life-altering. So I've met a lot of people over just, you know, the years that I was sick and now that I'm better, where they struggle with these types of things and they become very isolated and isolated from people that they want to be around, isolated from places they want to go, things they want to do that they can't do anymore because of the world has chemicals in it. And it's a very lonely place to be. So I want to encourage people that when they have those things, they can absolutely get past them. They can have a normal life again. I am living a very, very normal life. I'm able to be around chemicals. I'm able to be around people. And I'm okay. It's not my preference. I don't use chemicals on a regular basis because I'm kind of a health nut now. Kind of had to be. But you can definitely get to the other side with the EMF and the multiple chemical sensitivity. It can be done.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that's the key. That's the key, is to not give up. Because when we think that we can't and that it's never going to happen, we have already created a barrier to wellness for ourselves. If we believe that we can get to the other side, there is so much power in just believing that there can be a way out of this. Mm-hmm. There's power in that.
There's huge power in that, and I'm going to probe you on your recovery shortly and your whole philosophy of recovery, because I think you have some real gems of wisdom to share with people who are suffering now. But before we get to the light in this story, I want to talk about mast cell activations. Yes. And there's actually a video of you from 5 or 6 years ago or something like that, when you were in hospital and you were having a mast cell attack.
Yeah.
And what I'm just going to do now, I'm going to play that video. It's only about 30 seconds long, and then we'll speak to it after I've played it. So I'll just play it now, and we'll come back to the interview in a second.
You want some some water. Let me check and see if that'll be okay.
Please.
Just double check with the doctor.
Yes,
okay?
not having seizure. It's mast cell and needing water. I'm going to get sicker.
You think this was the grapes? Grapes are high histamines?
So Jared, that was you 5-6 years ago, and you were having that mast cell attack in hospitals. Speak to us about what was happening on that occasion and about the kind of mast cell experience that you had in general, because a lot of people with POTS are diagnosed with a subset where they also have mast cell activation problems.
Yeah, the video that you just saw is something that happens to me on a pretty regular basis. It wasn't like it just, that was one day and that was the only day. That was kind of a regular occurrence, so it will be difficult for me to pinpoint exactly what happened that day. I will say that I do remember that I was having a hard time eating at that time. It was difficult for me to try to find food that I could eat without having stuff like that happen. Mm-hmm. And I tried something that was a little different that day, and it just didn't go over well for me, as you can see. So that day, if I recall, so at that time I lived right next to the hospital, because I was always there. And I always it developed into this fear really of being far from the hospital because I needed it so much. So I lived probably like 2 minutes from the hospital. My oncologist, hematologist guy, who's kind of specialized with all this weird stuff. I mean, he tried. I went up there to see him during this episode, prior to this. And, he tried to help me. I remember looking like a freak because I was walking. I mean, people were looking at me like I had something wrong with me, which I did. Yeah. But I think they thought it was something mental health wise. Right. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, this poor girl, she's sick. Yeah. It's like, ooh, she needs a psychiatrist like pronto. Yeah. I mean, I walked like a robot. My entire body. Prior to that, I was walking like a robot. I was so rigid. I couldn't even. I was walking like a robot, like some kind of screwed up dance. It was, yeah. But I think I got a ton load of Benadryl that day. Prior to that video, I went to Mayo Clinic for a week. I went back to Mayo Clinic again after that. I found a mast cell type specialist. Oh, the mast cell thing. So I was having all these weird spots or whatever showing up. Mm-hmm. A lot of hives and stuff like that, and I had a lot of spare time because I couldn't do a whole heck of a lot, so I was reading a lot of research material, and I stumbled across an article about POTS and mast cell stuff being linked in some weird way, and I thought, what in the world is that? And I thought, well, I do feel like maybe I got a couple dark brown spots that I didn't have before, so I went to this dermatologist down south, and I got a biopsy, and they said, you do have cutaneous mastocytosis, which is all kind of connected to the mast cell stuff. And I thought, oh my gosh, like, eureka, dude, we're like gonna get somewhere with this. So I went, I found this specialist for this mast cell stuff, like 1 out of 5 in the nation at that time. Who knows what there are now. Mm-hmm. And I saw him in South Carolina, and that was kind of when stuff started kind of getting more hopeful for me, because I talked to somebody that really kind of understood what was going on with me. Mm-hmm. And wasn't just like, well, heck, this sounds awful, but I don't know what it is. He knew, and he gave me a lot of assistance. And you asked me earlier about meds. I started taking a lot of, gosh, what is Singulair? I was taking double the dose of Singulair. He started me on that. He put me back on Ativan based on my ER visit. I started taking like 300 milligrams of Zantac, and I had to get it compounded, of course, because I couldn't tolerate any of the chemicals in the over-the-counter stuff. I took Benadryl all the time, constant Benadryl, and that would head things off and help quite a bit, and that was compounded as well. I took Zyrtec, and then I switched over to Xyzal, the prescription version of that. And I started like feeling like I could function and live life without being completely tortured, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so that was a turning point for you. You found someone who was starting to understand.
It was a turning point, you know. I was able to email my doctor. I mean, I email him and he'd email me back within the hour. I mean, he was fantastic. I could be like, oh my gosh, how much, you know, antihistamines can I take, you know, that's not going to kill me to make this stop, you know? Because I was constantly just trying to prevent myself from going into anaphylaxis, basically.
Yes, absolutely. What a contrast to have a kind, caring doctor as opposed to this lady is on cocaine response that you had.
Right. So it was pretty great. So that was I felt more hopeful that maybe I could get somewhere after that. I felt like things were gonna try to hopefully go in the right direction, but still a very dark, and I was pretty miserable a good part of the time, and I really mean miserable.
Oh, sure, I understand. I understand exactly. And just to speak to the mast cell stuff for a second, in case you know people who watch this, they have mast cell and POTS. It makes total sense that you would have mast cell along with POTS, because when the limbic system is in crisis, you know, everything that the body normally sends out, all the hormones become ramped up to a new crisis level. So histamine, which is a crisis response to an allergic attack on the body, it stands to reason that that would get ramped up, and that things that previously would not cause an allergic response start to cause allergic responses.
Yes, exactly.
So in the case of that video, you had grape juice, and you know, and then you ended up in that situation, right? So there's like something that should never ever lead to that, but nevertheless, the body and brain picked it up as life-threatening. So it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that day, I can't even tell you. I actually have a second video to that video that I never got online just because I was so sick, and just, you know, I got the first one on there as like like an all call. Like, look, if you're having this and this is just, I want to help you. Like, I wanted to get it out there. But the second one, I mean, I am so swollen from all of the stuff they try to give me to get that to settle down, basically. But I feel like I'm not answering your questions because it was just such a violent tornado of a life experience to go through.
Okay, all right. So we've got an overview of the depths of despair that you went into, the real dark hole that became your life due to this limbic system impairment. But now let's turn towards the light, as it were. So tell us about how things started to get better for you.
So things started getting better for me when I really started taking a lot of antihistamines and trying new things. Once I was able to do that, I was able to kind of function a little bit better as a person, to where I was out of crisis mode, kind of, and I was able to try to really seek out what I could do to get better. You know, I had a lot of faith that this wasn't going to be something that would take me out forever. I really believed that it would be used to make me stronger, to make me a better woman, and so that I could go out and help other people with this. So I really, I think if I had mentally stayed in a devastating place where this is always going to be my life, then I'm just not sure I would have pursued out something to help me get better. I had a lot of faith that God was going to bring me through it and get me to the other side. You know, I had a friend, of course, when you're really broken in this way, you find other broken people to talk to about it because normal people don't understand. So my best friend, who is still my best friend, she had POTS too. We met online, and she was trying this really weird, crazy sounding program. I'm like, okay, tell me more. So she was doing this brain retraining type deal, and I thought she was nuts. I really did. So fast forward a little bit, and my very dear friend Jenny was starting to get better,
Right.
and I was not. Jenny wasn't as sick as me, but she struggled. You know, she struggled, and we weren't really comparing ourselves to each other. But I still watching her get better, you know, and I'm still in the same mess. It's like, wow, you know.
Yeah.
It was interesting. So at the time, I had went to the mast cell specialist person, and he was going to try me on this. It was some kind of anti-cancer drug, because we had tried everything, you know, that there was really to try, and I was still sick. I had talked by phone to another mast cell specialist. I talked to them directly by phone at Brigham. I can't remember. It's up north, another university type place, and they're just they just didn't know what else to do for me. I was kind of at the end. It was like, okay, there's nothing left to help me, and I felt very. I started gastrocrom, and I had a crazy reaction to that. And then my doctor wanted to try me on some kind of anti-cancer medication. And I thought, my gosh, is this like all that I've come to, where we're just going to try all these potentially harmful things to try to help me? Is this where I am? Is there truly nothing left for me? Mm-hmm. I had read a Bible scripture, because anybody that has this gets desperate, okay? I mean, if somebody had come to my door and said, look, I have dog poop, and if you eat it, you're going to be better, I would have eaten it, I would have shoveled it in and done it every day. Yeah. I was so desperate to get better. I would have done anything, honestly. Anything that wasn't wrong, I would have done it. Mm-hmm. So I didn't feel good about the anti-cancer drug thing. I just didn't want to be some kind of lab rat or something. It just didn't seem right. So the Bible scripture I read that said, if you have the elders of your church anoint you with oil and pray, you know, this prayer of faith, that you're going to be made well. And I thought, well, heck, I believe in Jesus. Bring it on. I need some wellness. So I did. I had the elders at my church at the time, and so they came over. They did it, and shortly after I started the brain retraining stuff. And from all of those moments, it was just like everything started getting better and looking up for me. Praise the Lord. I'm so thankful. I started doing some brain retraining stuff that my friend Jenny told me about. Just stuff she's telling me by phone, and I'm just trying to do the best. Mm-hmm. When I started that, I never drank Benadryl again. Wow. That I can remember. And wow. I was taking Benadryl all day and jonesing for it. Like, oh my gosh, I need more Benadryl. I can't, this is going to get out of control on me, and I need Benadryl. Never again did I ever have to take Benadryl.
Yeah, I get goosebumps just hearing that, because, you've had to take it for years. It's been your only lifesaver in a way, and then suddenly,
yeah, kinda.
It's kind of keeping things in check, even though it's keeping them in check in a nightmare. But it's still, to that, and then suddenly not to have to take it must have been the most extraordinary thing for you.
It was because I thought, oh my gosh, you feel like crap when you take Benadryl, okay? It's not something that makes you feel good. You don't feel good when you take Benadryl. You're exhausted. It hits you like a ton of bricks. And I was taking a very big dose because that's my doctor, was giving me a big dose to take. So it was hitting me like a ton of bricks. And I was a small girl, as you know, I lost all that weight. So it was hitting me hard. So to not take Benadryl, I'm like, oh my gosh, am I not going to die from some anaphylactic episode someday? Like, yes, it was so great. I mean, I still struggled immensely, but it was just a much needed victory on the path, because when you struggle so much, you just need some kind of light burning, even if it's a very far away, distant burn.
Yeah.
In the dark, you need that.
Absolutely. And then over time, that light expands to remove that darkness. So tell us more about, let's say, the first 3 or 4 months of doing the dynamic neural retraining system and the changes you experienced.
Oh my goodness. Well, let's just say I followed it to the stinking T, dude. Like, I didn't leave not one thing out. I did every single piece and part, because at that point, it's like, okay. Oh, and by the way, I had no money.
Yeah.
Because this whole situation completely devastated our family. Mm-hmm. So I can get that. I'm so, lost everything. Everything we had, we lost it. Mm-hmm. So my mom, of course, thank the good Lord for mothers. She bought me this program, and I'm so glad that she did. So the first 3 or 4 months, I started noticing little weird things that were going away, nothing big, it wasn't like, oh, my blood pressure's not low, it was very slow, it was like, oh, I didn't have, I wasn't, having this particular one out of 20 billion symptoms today. Oh, that's cool. But, I had to keep notes on that, because when you feel sick otherwise, it's hard to notice. But I did notice that right away, I started noticing some differences right away. I mean, literally within a day or two. Mm-hmm. So basically, I started trying to get off my meds, because I was taking a lot of medication. Mm-hmm. And I felt like, okay, if I think I'm feeling somewhat better, then let's try to pull back, because I'm taking literally double dose of everything that I was taking. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll just bring it down to a single dose. And that's kind of how I did it. I started breaking off tiny little pieces of my pills and being okay with it. And I slowly, systematically got off my meds doing that. I was in a wheelchair for a long time, for a year. So I really just started small. Okay, I want to be able to stand here and cook some eggs. Or, and I built up my goals. I want to be able to stand for the songs in church. When everybody stands up, I don't want to be like that one person sitting on the pew, right?
Yeah. So
I started with these small goals, because you can't go from being in a wheelchair for a year to, outrunning a marathon. So I started slow, and that's really what I did. I slowly, systematically used that program. And I'm not going to lie, I did a lot of other things too, mm-hmm. Such as natural things. I got rid of all the chemicals. I really reduced the chemical burden that was on my body. Mm-hmm. I switched to really natural things, natural eating. I wasn't eating any junk, couldn't have tolerated it anyway. But, I was trying to do some recumbent exercise. Trying was the key word. I tried to do a lot of different things, but I really feel like the brain retraining was really the most successful. But I do think it should be combined with common sense, Absolutely. It would be hard to drink caffeinated cup of coffee and do your brain retraining, and that would not to have affected me at that time, it would have been unreasonable. Or to eat a ton load of Pop-Tarts or something. It just wouldn't have been smart.
No, I totally agree with that. And I think you need a combined effort on lots of different fronts because someone can be totally, healthy from a limbic system point of view, but if they eat lots of sugar, they're going to feel crap. Or if they have all of these, chemicals in the environment, that's going to affect them. So it's about bringing everything together. So while you're rewiring the root cause, you're still supporting yourself in every other way possible.
Yes, and that's what I try to do.
Yeah. So tell us about the moment when you got out of the wheelchair.
Again, it was a slow and systematic thing. I hate that wheelchair. I still remember the look of it. Gosh, I would have thrown it off a cliff if I could have. It was a terrible feeling being young and in a wheelchair. Because people, the way they look at you and like oh no, what happened to you? And just, I don't know. It's just not a good feeling, to be in a wheelchair. And I had 2 little kids, so they're with me. So I get more, people felt bad for me, which was nice. And I appreciate it. It was just really hard to be in a wheelchair. So I slowly tried to, like I said, to plan goals and to envision myself without it. A big one was walking from the car into church without the wheelchair. Because that's normal, right? I mean, yeah, I can't walk around Walmart without the little motorized cart, but if I can pretend I'm normal and walk from my car into church, that's pretty good, right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
So I started building up like that. Like I would attempt like a grocery shopping trip, but only for like 5 or 10 minutes, and then that's it. And then I'd pull the plug and I'd get out of there. I just slowly kind of weaned myself off the thing is the way it went, but it felt amazing. I felt like I got my life back, really. I think I was at a place, where I didn't think I'd ever really be able to do life without it. So to get to a place where I can walk and be free of that, and it was just amazing. It's just a really great feeling. Yeah, it brings tears to my eyes because it's a pretty rough, raw place to be. To really be stripped of everything that you have and to start to get it back when you don't think you're ever going to. Because that's the way it was. I thought, this is my life and this will be my life forever. Yeah. So to get to where I think I'm gaining that back, it's really the best blessing on the planet, to be able to get your life back. So, yes. And it's not just for the special either. It is something that is more rare. It is not something that happens a lot. But I think that it is something that can happen for everyone. Mm-hmm. I really believe that.
Absolutely. As do I. I firmly believe it, because that brain has no choice but to rewire, right? You just do the exercises. And
it's weird. Patrick, it's weird. Come on. This brain thing is weird.
Yeah.
But it I don't know. It does work. It's some kind of creepy, weird, wild thing, but it does. It really does work.
So tell us, how long after starting the program properly could you put the wheelchair away for good?
Gosh, shoot. I think I started, just remember the informal brain retraining stuff that I was trying to do just by, word of mouth before I bought the program. But I think I started in October, November, and I think I was out of the wheelchair in January or February.
Wow. Gosh, yeah. that must have, from where you were coming from, that must have felt like a miracle.
Yes, praise God. Yeah. It did. It was a blessing. I remember getting rid of the wheelchair, and it felt really good. I hated that thing. So yes, it felt really, really good. Yeah,
what a defining moment for you. And I remember too in my own recovery, although I wasn't in at all as an extreme position as you, but how it does feel like as you're recovering, can this really be happening? Is this body which was not mine actually becoming mine again? It's the most extraordinary feeling.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, and it gave me just the hope that that this could happen for me, and I really just felt like this was the way to move forward. I really believe God led me to brain retraining. As crazy as it sounds, I really believe that He did, because after that I started being able to add more foods back in. I started trying to be able to go into stores, because by that time I was completely isolated. Remember, I wasn't able to be around people. I wasn't able to go to church anymore. It was just becoming a really great hardship to be around people. So it was just amazing it was good. It was just really, really good. And it's pretty amazing too. I mean, my husband he was just like, wow, this is pretty crazy. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is crazy to think that you could regain an ability to do something that you lost just by doing these kinds of weird brain exercises. But honestly, like, I was the perfect person for it, because I had done everything already. There was nothing left for me. Mm-hmm. I mean, my hematologist that I had, when I lived 2 minutes from the hospital, I mean, I had his personal cell phone. My doctors had such compassion for me. I had personal relationships with all my doctors. I had their personal email addresses and personal cell phone numbers. Mm-hmm. How does that happen?
Yeah, right.
But that never happens. That was just a blessing, but they knew how bad, my struggle was. And, it was just amazing. Neuroplasticity. It's pretty amazing stuff. Very amazing.
It is.
And I've met a lot of people that I have tried to help use this program better. Mm-hmm. And I could probably list off 6 people at least, maybe even 10 that I personally have talked to, mm-hmm. that I've encouraged to use it, and they've gotten better with it.
That's amazing. That's absolutely, and the power of neuroplasticity, because if you think about it, neuroplasticity led you into the hell. That was a negative neuroplastic response to that initial mold poisoning that you had, and things escalated. But as there was a time before that when your brain was in a happy enough state, and you were able then, with neuroplasticity, to draw it back out of that negative neuroplastic response that you had, because it can go both ways, negative and positive. But you're a living testimony to the positive. And I want to speak to the various other aspects of the illness that you had and how they resolved over time. Can you tell us about your heart rate scores and your blood pressure variability? When did they kind of settle down?
Yeah, I think that started getting better too. I remember on that first year when I moved to Virginia after I left Florida, I started getting, my husband got a job offer in Virginia, and we talked, and we're like, gosh, I am kind of getting better. I think I'm better enough to be able to move away from family and try to rebuild our life, Mm-hmm. It was definitely a risk for our family, but it was worth it. But so I bring that up because I remember being in that first year in Virginia and having my blood pressure would be like in the 80s on top, which is pretty bad. That's when I start to really feel it. And I remember that day just being like, you know what? I'm going to drink some water. I'm going to eat some salt. I'm going to do my retraining. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to DC, baby. And I went and I walked 3 miles.
Wow.
It was amazing. Yeah. So I think over time it just started being less extreme. Instead of my blood pressure being so high or so low, it started becoming more intermediate, and then it just started coming down. I think with brain retraining, what happens to most people when they try to do it is that they will try to tackle their most challenging issues first, instead of the more simpler ones, when it's really the more challenging ones that take the longest. Okay. So for me, the blood pressure and the heart rate was something that was one of the more extreme problems that I had, along with other things. And, I would say that I was walking, several miles in DC, which that was amazing, dude. Like,
Yeah.
that was a pretty good day to go to DC and walk. I'm not gonna lie, there was a time when we went to the DC Zoo when I was there, and we were walking. I walked all day, and by the end I was done. Like, I couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
We had to get like some kind of something. I think I sat in my son's stroller, and my husband pushed me through the not North Carolina, the National Zoo in my kid's stroller. You would not imagine what kind of looks I got. But yeah, so I got better slowly. Yeah, I was out walking 3 miles, but I wasn't completely better.
Yeah.
Because after that, I was pretty much toast, for a few days, and had to, but that was a pretty big, deal.
It's a huge deal after a year in a wheelchair and everything you went through. But I think that the fact that it takes a while for the heart rate especially to come down makes sense, because in terms of the thesis I'm putting forward, there's two aspects to POTS recovery. There's the neurological crisis, and then there's the health effects that's had on the body as a result. So, you have the initial trauma, and then you have, I go into this in my book and also on this channel, but then you have the problems with your blood vessels, which affect the heart rate, and they come as a secondary result of the neurological problem, but they're going to heal up slowly. They can't heal up overnight. So it makes sense that it might take even up to a year potentially, 6, 7, 8 months for the blood vessels to heal up and for heart rate to come down completely.
You know what the unfortunate thing is, though, is that many people, what happens to them, and it happened to me too, is that they get a lot of severe anxiety, which makes perfect sense because you're going through the worst time in your life. And yeah, it's scary to not know if you're going to pass out when you go to the grocery store or not.
Yeah.
So the anxiety that's there can exacerbate what you're already dealing with and really kind of keep a lot of people in a bad place and prevent them from getting out and trying new stuff and taking some reasonable risks in order to attempt moving forward to a better place physically, health-wise. So what I liked about the brain retraining type stuff is that it almost helps you deal with the anxiety part of it too, which I think is huge. Many people need that,
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. And I just want to also speak a little bit more about that, because I think obviously the limbic system is also where anxiety emanates from.
Yes.
So this is sort of, but this is where I think a lot of people make a mistake, because they think that in saying that POTS is caused by limbic system impairment, that one is suggesting that it's an anxiety-related condition. But of course, there are many ways in which those parts of the brain can enter crisis. It doesn't have to be something initially psychological. So, it's quite possible that, and in most cases with POTS, it's something that was a non-psychological trauma. So like the mold in your case, or in other people's cases, it could be a viral illness or whatever it is. But what happens then is that the limbic system is tipped into crisis, and the anxiety centers start to go off, but not because the person was psychologically anxious. It's because something beyond their control that was terrible happened and tipped the brain into crisis. So you have all that adrenaline going off, but it's not because you're having a panic attack. It's because of something else awful that happened to you initially. But then, of course, on top of that, you're going to be psychologically anxious as well, because it's the worst thing that's ever happened to you.
Right. It is complicated because once you start doing the program, you think, well, good night. Was this all in my head? And then I think, well, no, I've had multiple tilt tables that have confirmed that this is the issue. I've had blood work that shows all this stuff. I've had a biopsy to confirm the mast cell issue. There's just, it is, once you start getting better, you think, it has crossed my mind, like, my goodness, sure, this wasn't in my head, but because once you're better for a while, if you stay in that place long enough, you forget the hell that it was, but it comes back awful quick when you bring it up. But it's definitely some weird kind of way that the brain responds to trauma, like you say. It's pretty crazy that it happens. All I can tell you is, by the good Lord's grace and intervention, I have a very wonderful life. I'm able to eat food, whatever I want. At the time I found I was allergic to dairy and soy, so I can't just go eat dairy and soy for fun, because that would be stupid. But, I'm eating way more than 8 foods, that's for sure. I'm able to spend as much time as I want at the grocery store, at the mall. I can walk, I can hike, oh my goodness, I went zip lining. Dude. It was so much fun in the mountains in Asheville. It was unbelievable. I'm going to Wet and Wild and dunking my body in chemical pools and sliding, and I'm just so incredibly thankful, the chemical stuff is not an issue. Yeah, I don't use chemicals in my house. I try to use natural products, and I try to eat really, really healthy. But it doesn't affect me to go to somebody's house who, who doesn't use those things, whereas before it would have. Oh, I bought a brand new house, and all of the off-gassing. I'm sure all the people that are chemically sensitive know exactly what I'm talking about. In a brand new house, there's all those smells and all those things, and I'm totally fine. It can all kind of reverse itself and back off. I'm sitting here on the iPad talking to you and don't have an issue. I'm just incredibly thankful, and I don't want to say those things to make anybody else feel bad, because they're in a place that they're not there. But I say those things to show them that yes, you can absolutely get to the other side, and never give up. That's one of my big life slogans, is never ever give up. I'm pretty sure I said it to you.
Yeah.
But that's the key, is not to ever give up. I know what kind of a dark place it is to be in and to live in, and to feel like it's never going to end, and it's always going to be that way. But I have talked to many people who have started this program and not fully understood it, and been anxious and frustrated, and they're not getting results like this, and I've been able to encourage them too. That's what a good person that's done it before, trying to coach and mentor, is really helpful, so they can explain to you what you're missing and what your weaknesses are, and how you're seeing something that may not be quite helpful for you, and turning it around. So
Absolutely, this is not an overnight thing. It really does take time to rewire and for the body to heal, and one has to be very realistic about that. In terms of your own experience, when did you feel that the POTS was, for all intents and purposes, gone, the mast cell activation was gone, the chemical sensitivity was gone? When were you back to yourself? Maybe you weren't 100%, but when were you feeling, I'm safe, I'm out of the woods?
Okay, so let's see here. After I started the brain retraining, I told you when I got out of the wheelchair, and then I got off every single medication. I was taking 6. I was off every single one of them. It wasn't any more than 6 months. It had to have been less than that, way less. I could look at my notes and get you, but it was not more than 6 months.
Wow.
But I was off. I was off the really big heavy hitters. I remember, let's see, I had, a few bumps in the road when I moved to Northern Virginia. That would have been about 8 months, 9, 10 months after I started the program. I tried some kind of shampoo that had a medication in it, and I needed to take some Zyrtec for it. I would say, well, let's see, I'm 36, and this all happened when I was 29, I guess, and I would say that I've been better for 3 years. and it's lasting, it's not like I got better for, a year and now I'm sick again. I've been like really, really like in the top, like 98% better for the past 3 years. And 36, 29, 32. After starting the program, I think I probably moved into the 80% better, which says a lot considering where I was. Seriously.
Yeah.
Definitely maybe a year later, I was looking at 80. Not much longer than that, maybe 6 months to a year, I was at 90, in the 90% better.
Right.
This is all, again, rough estimate because it was the vortex, like you said. But it didn't take long to be into a really, really good place. And it's I don't want anybody to be like, wow, it took her 2 years to get better. No, like I said, I was getting better with a lot of different symptoms. It only took just a couple days to where I was like, oh my goodness, this is doing something. So,
yeah, absolutely. Because once you're getting into a more stable position and you get that forward momentum, it almost doesn't kind of matter really how long it's going to take because the dark days are receding, and that's the big thing.
Yes. And once you start getting better, you're like, well, you want it all now, right? Like you've been doing this program for 6 months and it's like, yeah, I'm out of the wheelchair, but now I really want to, go do my dream of, hiking this and that. And it's just, I was really, really in a bad spot. So I think depending on where you're starting, you have to be reasonable. But I was able to eat nearly anything I wanted. I would probably say that happened in definitely less than 6 months as well.
Well, considering
and on the timeline, I was gaining foods by the day. I didn't just go from eating 8 foods to eating everything overnight or in a week. It was more of, well, this week now I've added back in these things and I'm fine, and then I'm going to add these other things back in next week, and this one didn't work, I'll try it again later, and that kind of thing.
My final question to you, Jared, is can you tell us a bit more about your life now and what would be your message to those suffering with POTS?
Okay, my life now is I'm on the other side. Several years ago, it had to have been 4 years ago, I was retested for POTS, and he's like, you don't have it anymore. I'm like, praise the Lord, woohoo! Yeah. I was tested again. I didn't have it. The mast cell stuff is never an issue for me. If I accidentally, eat something that I'm allergic to, which has happened, it's not like I don't have to like chug Benadryl. It's just normal. It's like, oh, oops, I ate something, that I didn't realize had soy in it, and I got a few hives and I'm fine. My life, I homeschool. I'm extremely active in my church. I love helping people. I love to encourage people. I exercise, which is a really fun thing. It makes me feel so alive, I can go hiking. I've went ziplining. I've flown in a plane, which, if you know anything about being sick, flying in a plane is like, that's terrifying, because if you get stuck up there, there's nobody helping you. I've flown in a plane. I'm just incredibly grateful. I'm very thankful. I feel well, and I don't know that I feel like 100%, but then again, I'm 36. I do have Hashimoto's. I don't take any medications at all whatsoever for anything. I feel pretty good. All my other mom friends feel tired too. I think that's just normal.
That is normal. The 100% thing it's a myth. No one's 100%. Who are these people? They don't. Exactly.
Thank you. So I'm not some super beast out doing CrossFit and biking 20 miles a day and stuff, but I don't want to be. Yeah. I just have my regular normal life, and I do what I want, and I try to bless other people along the way, and I eat healthily, and sometimes I'll sit down and I'll eat a whole box of cookies, and it feels pretty good, and it doesn't give me any symptoms. Right. Afterwards I might go, that probably wasn't the best idea, but that's what a normal person, what would happen to a normal person.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So my
Absolutely.
message really is, again, don't ever give up. There's always some kind of light at the end of your tunnel. You just have to open your eyes and look for it. Really seek it out. Sometimes we give up when stuff gets hard because fighting is too tiresome. But if we pull together everything that we have and we fight, if we believe in something bigger than who we are, God, if we pursue out different things that may make us uncomfortable, if we give up things that we know we shouldn't have anyway, like, certain chemicals or, junk food or whatever, if we're willing to try and to explore, I think there's something out there for us. But the key is not to give up on it and to stay positive and to give it your all, and to seek out positivity. You know what? Oh my goodness, I have met so many people that struggle. And you know who they talk to all the time? Other people that struggle, that complain, that are negative, because those people understand. But when you're trying to get better, when you're trying to heal, you have to seek out positive people to encourage and inspire and light your fire, because the people that are complaining are going to pull you back. They're going to hold you back. You have to seek out positive people, positive things in your life so that you can move forward. So please don't underestimate that part of getting better, is seeking out positive messages and just hope. Hope. We all die without hope, So there's a lot of hope out there. There really is.
Thank you very much, Jared. I want to just thank you from the bottom of my heart for...
You are so welcome. It's so my pleasure. It's my passion. I want to spread the good news about just believing in God and getting better and trying the neuroplasticity, and really not just like a sample, like you're going to sample something at Costco. You're really going to give it a good go, and because it's a really amazing blessing that's stinking weird as heck, and you're going to tell people about it, and you're going to feel crazy, but that's okay.
Absolutely.
It's a blessing. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
My greatest pleasure. And you talk of stories of positivity and hope, and you are that personified. And I want to thank you for sharing how you found that light out of the darkness, how you were a fighter and you fought every step of the way, even when you were at the depths of despair.
Yeah.
And you talk about how now your life is largely also about blessing people, and I think with this video you'll have blessed a lot of people, and I want to thank you for speaking so openly with such great detail, which will help a lot of people who are struggling now, and I have no doubt that your story will inspire others to recover, so thank you.